Thank you, sir. We're going to hear from Ms. Patrick and then Mr. Steen.
Fine.
Mr. Patterson, good afternoon.
Sorry.
Are you okay?
Yes, indeed. Yes, thank you.
My name is Miss Patrick, and I ask questions on behalf of a number of sub-postmasters who were wrongfully convicted and have since had their convictions quashed. And I only want to raise one topic. When you gave evidence in January, at the end of your evidence, you committed to meeting sub-postmasters and their families. Is that right?
I committed to meeting sub-postmasters and the families contacted me.
Yeah. And in August, early August, 7 months on, you met then with representatives of the children who suffered as a result of their parents being prosecuted and convicted. You're nodding, Mr. Patterson. You have to say yes.
Oh,
or
sorry.
no.
Yes, yes.
And in that meeting, there were 9 children of former sub-postmasters, including Katie Downey, Rebecca Foot and Katie Burrows, who sit next to me today. Again, you're nodding. You have to say yes or no.
Yes, I recognise them now. Yes.
Yep. And I think you might be aware that their group is called Lost Chances for Sub-Postmaster Children.
Yes, I am.
And Lost Chances for Postmaster Children affected by the Horizon scandal, they're campaigning for financial support to address chances and opportunities lost, or as they would say, taken from them during their childhood as a result of the experiences of their families. Now, today, perhaps coincidentally or fortuitously, while we raised your contact that you'd had with their group, with the Secretary of State during his evidence, they've had a response from the Post Office to their request for a meeting with them. But you have met their group, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And during that meeting, they did something that was quite painful for them. They'd written down their stories and they shared, each of them, with you, everything that they had gone through, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
And it was in very moving terms, to be frank, wasn't it?
It was.
They explained that their lost opportunities and their trauma, so it just isn't caught by any existing compensation, redress or restorative justice scheme. Is that fair?
That's my understanding, yes.
And you listened to what they had to say, and that you said you would take it away and you would come back to them.
Yes.
And that's over 3 months ago now, August, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Hudjo Solicitors has regularly sought updates on their behalf from Fujitsu as to what would happen and when. Is that fair?
I believe so.
And just very briefly, we don't have to go through the detail. In September on the 13th, your solicitors for Fujitsu replied and said that your team were continuing to study what you had learned during your meeting in August. Could you just ask briefly, very briefly, what had you learned in your August meeting?
So I think as your three colleagues, the 3 members of the group sitting beside you, it was a very difficult day for them, and it was a very difficult day to listen. They had a number of ideas, some of which I've got no experience of personally. I don't know in how we would execute those things, and I think I said in the meetings we are not the right people to the right organisation to do some of those things. But let us think about, could we find organisations? But equally, I think the group were also structuring themselves differently to allow us to potentially engage them in a more structured way than the way that it was previously. So. We do want to engage in that way. I'm still unclear about what things we can do other than sums of money. The list of, I think the education topic that we talked about, the mental health topic that we talked about, how we can as a company help in that way. And I think there was also a conversation around legacy on education. I think there was I didn't bring my notes with me on that particular meeting. So we still want to do that. Frankly, we've struggled, though, to figure out how.
Can I ask you to pause there for one moment, because I know we're very short of time. The last reply they received, I believe, suggests you would revert with a timetable around engagement towards the end of this year. but you had no further updates at this time, and that came through Fujitsu solicitors. Does that mean that it will be the end of the year before you can take a position on whether you can engage further with the Lost Chances organisation and with people sitting here? Is that what that means?
So I think there was something else that happened today, which with the Secretary of State, where he also said he thought there was a theme in here or a topic in here that we could be involved in. I don't know what format that engagement with 2 of you, 3 of you, the 9 of you could be before the end of the calendar year. But I won't stay silent. So I won't stay silent.
So you won't stay silent. Can I just ask, you said before the end of the year. Now, given everything that you've said today, and we know what you've said about waiting till the end of the inquiry, everything you've said today about that meeting and about Fujitsu's role in the scandal, is there really any need for this work, this engagement, to wait till the end of the inquiry to decide where Fujitsu might fit?
For us as a company, it's very difficult to understand. When we had the first conversation, very difficult to understand where that engagement could be. What could we do? You had a list of several topics that we think could help with. I think that we'd want to explore those again. Not to. I think, in fact, Rebecca, you made the point about kicking the ball down the road. Not to do that, but we struggled, frankly, to find a way to engaging it. Now, I think, if my memory's right, you've also structured yourself slightly differently now, I believe. I owe it to you to have a look at what that new structure looks like, and is there a way that we could engage with before the end of the calendar year?
Thank you.
And I don't know off the top of my head what your new structure looks like. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. There have been updates provided to Fujitsu, and I'm very grateful for your indication that there would be further engagement.
Before Mr. Steen asks you any questions, Mr. Patterson, can I just get clarity about one point? So far as Fujitsu is concerned, does the end of the inquiry for taking steps mean at the close of play on the 17th of December, when the last final oral submissions are made, or does it mean when I report?
I haven't given it, Sewin, any practical thoughts. Actually, I'm hoping once you finish taking all the evidence, we can sit down with government, given that we'll know a number of themes and a number of conclusions, shall we say, given everybody's listened to it. But I hadn't given it a definitive date, sir.
No, well, that's all right. But I would like you to ponder that, because I think everybody will realise that there is bound to be a period of time. I won't commit myself to any particular period of time between the 17th of December and when I produce a report. And I think it would help both clarity and transparency if Fujitsu did clarify that.
I will take that up with the department as well. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, all right. Mr. Steen.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Patterson, we've met before. Can we go straight to a document which is FUJ 002431199? So that's FUJ 002431199. Now, so that's the letter dated the 17th of May that you're familiar with. And on that first page, can we scroll down, please, to Roman numeral 2, pursuit of shortfalls from postmasters. And we'll see there, Mr. Patterson, let's just read through that together. So this is a letter from you to Mr. Reid, and the relevant part that I'm going to take you to, therefore, says, it seems that the Post Office may be continuing to pursue postmasters for shortfalls in their accounts using Horizon data. We would have expected that the Post Office has changed its behaviour in light of the criticisms and is appropriately circumspect with respect to any enforcement actions. It should not be relying on Horizon data as the basis for such shortfall enforcement. Now, this appears to be a fairly serious letter. Did you mean what this says?
I know what I wrote.
Did you mean it?
Well, it's what I wrote, Mr. Steen.
Well, you either mean something or you don't, Mr. Patterson. Is that correct in what it seems to say, which is the Post Office should not be using Horizon data to go after sub-postmasters for shortfalls?
I think, as I've said during the last hour or so, there is multiple data points that the Post Office should be using before they conclude whether a shortfall or a theft has taken place.
Let's try it one more time. Well, let's try it again. It should not be relying on Horizon data as the basis for shortfall enforcement. When you wrote that, was that what you felt?
Yes, Mr. Steen.
Do you still stand by that?
I think, as I've given in evidence today several times, you cannot rely on just one data source.
Well, it's not quite the same thing, is it?
No, it is exactly the same thing. It's Horizon data, and I've said you can't rely on one source of data.
Right. So Horizon data should not be used by the Post Office to go after sub-postmasters for what the Post Office reckons may be money owed by the sub-postmaster. Is that right?
So, Mr. Steen, there's 4 investigations at the moment with the police. We have given material to the police which talks about all the data that they should frankly be looking at to determine whether a theft has taken place or whatever the crime is.
Does it amount to this, Mr. Patterson, that perhaps to use that phrase much loved of in this inquiry, with the benefit of hindsight, this sentence should read, it should not be relying solely on Horizon data, etc.
Yes, Sir Wynne, yes.
Fine, thank you.
I have the word basis and solely as interchangeable.
Yeah.
The point you made earlier in your evidence, Mr. Patterson, was one whereby you referred to it as one data point. In other words, that there should be something else outside of Horizon data. Is that what you're trying to say here in your evidence?
Yes, and that was my point earlier about the complete supply chain that provides information to Horizon or actually to sub-postmasters themselves. You cannot rely solely on one data source.
Right. So on its own, Horizon data is insufficient to mount a case against a sub-postmaster for a shortfall. Is that what you're trying to say?
So I am not a legal person. I'm not a legal. In my view, and in our company's view, you cannot rely on that solely for the data.
To pursue people for shortfalls?
Yes.
Right. And Fujitsu's position on this, will you support the Post Office in pursuing sub-postmasters for shortfalls?
We've said we won't do that.
Right. Okay. So let's add this all together. Fujitsu will not support the Post Office if the Post Office is going after a postmaster for a shortfall, either in I suppose, correspondence with that sub-postmaster or in courts. Is that correct?
I thought you were going to add another sentence based solely on Horizon data.
Well, that's the one you've added today, prompted by Sir Wynne. But
I'll go the other way, based on shortfall data.
Right.
So whether you want to use basis or solely, the same thing applies.
So what's going to happen? You're going to have to be persuaded that there's something else other than Horizon data before you provide support to the Post Office? How's it going to work, Mr. Patterson?
So, as I've said in my evidence today, there are multiple data sources, and if you look at the YouGov data, about different places where errors or omissions or issues can occur. All of that needs to be in play, and the investigation needs to be not taking a narrow view, but a holistic view.
So are you going to get the Post Office to come to you, provide the data, and then see what else comes up? Or do you need the support, in other words, something other than Horizon data before you hand over the Horizon data? Which is it?
So Horizon data, as I said earlier, will be inside the Post Office's house by February, all historical data. So they'll have all the data that are required. And I think in evidence from several members of the Post Office Executive, they've got that data already. So they've got the data that they need. My evidence point is I would like to be satisfied that they are using more than just one data source. And I've not seen anything which tells me that they're using more than one data source.
I see. So in that sense, we put this all together. Frankly, you don't trust the Post Office in order to get this right.
Well, on this particular topic, I absolutely don't trust the Post Office.
You mentioned one further point in your evidence to Mr. Blake. This is about the age of the system, okay? You said this, to give this some context, we have not turned off some of this equipment because it's so old.
Mm-hmm.
Help us understand what would happen if you did turn it on.
I've got no idea.
Right.
So in my experience of 35 years in this industry, you know, if you do not do disaster recovery, if you do not turn things on, if you don't keep them upgraded, I cannot determine what will or will not happen, which is part of our nervousness about any extension.
Let's turn back to the question that I asked you now so many months ago in January of this year. Now, I asked you these questions, which was, you're aware of the effect of this scandal upon sub-postmasters. It's felt by their families, by their loved ones, by their partners, by their children. This devastated not only the sub-postmasters' individual lives, but everyone around them. Sub-postmasters, because they could not see what was going on, would sometimes blame their own partners or their employees. And the effect, therefore, of this scandal is much more widespread than on the sub-postmasters themselves, whose lives sometimes have been terminated by this scandal. And I asked you this. Will Fujitsu commit to providing funds in recompense for all those hurts to others outside of sub-postmasters and the compensation scheme? In other words, financial redress to support others that have been affected. I ask this. You may want to think that what could be done by Fujitsu is supporting people in the future, sub-postmasters in future entrepreneurial endeavours, their families in such or in education. Will Fujitsu consider that type of support? And you said this. Mr. Steen, the inquiry and the exploration of the history of all of this is getting a great deal of attention and support from us. Our company here in the UK has many things in society around the country, around the UK. I think the suggestion you've just made, and clearly, you said it, the transcript says clearly in a conversation, I think you meant is a conversation. If I were able to come to engage with sub-postmasters and their representation, their representatives, we would be absolutely something we would like to consider. So you appear to be giving a positive answer to the general suggestion, which is providing some way to provide support. Today, in answer to the questions on such matters, you said that Fujitsu wishes to engage in a discussion with government. You mentioned also sub-postmasters as to providing the financial support that would go to government. Now, has Fujitsu written off doing something more creative than that? In other words, setting up a fund, bursaries for the children, for the families, for those people with lost opportunities? Have they written that off, and is it just going to be money to government?
So when I met the sub-postmasters, there were many suggestions. And in fact, one sub-postmaster made it clear to me the company should not be giving any money to government at all. We are not we've got no experience of setting up these things or doing these things. As I just said to the lost families, we were hoping that through government channels we'd be able to provide funds to contribute to some of those areas. To be more creative, we're struggling to find out how we can be more creative, frankly, because that's not something that we've got any experience in. I was hoping, equally from this morning's conversation, that there would be more activity in and around the law and changing the law or lobbying for the law to change, because I was personally, as a normal citizen, surprised that the families did not have recourse to some of those other areas of compensation. But I haven't written it off, Mr. Steen. I'm just not quite sure where to go.
Well, where to go, Mr. Patterson, is to go back to the representatives representing people that have been in this situation and say, can you help? We are, if this is right, Fujitsu is trying to see what can be done. do you have experience with compensation frameworks, redress schemes, restorative justice schemes? And you will find that Howe & Co., Mr. Enright, who sits to my left, who sits to Mr. Kelly's right, you may recall Mr. Kelly from meetings. He does have that expertise. The people are out there, Mr. Patterson. Why haven't you reached out since January of this year to those people that can provide such assistance for you on these important queries?
So there's no reason why I haven't reached out. I've had the meetings, Mr. Steen. Thank you for the suggestion. We'll have the conversation in due course with the colleagues. As an IT company, we are unsure where to go and what to do about it. We were hoping that the compensation schemes and contributing to the government compensation schemes would be a suitable vehicle for redress.
But you know that those compensation schemes are not providing this type of support to the wider family. So all that appears to be happening is Fujitsu is contemplating a contribution, subbing the government for the compensation schemes that are currently in place. That's what you seem to be saying.
So that is what I was saying earlier, and what you've just suggested to me is that your organisation or colleagues may have some expertise in these other areas, and we'll have that conversation.
Is there a standstill agreement between the civil action from the Post Office and Fujitsu as to whether the one, Post Office, will sue the other, Fujitsu?
Yes, there is.
So, in essence, what may be happening here, do you agree, Mr. Patterson, is Fujitsu is considering paying some compensation towards the compensation funds in order to stave off as a way of settling the action from the Post Office against Fujitsu. That's what it appears to be, Mr. Patterson.
Well, it's not, Mr. Steen.
So any funds committed by Fujitsu towards compensation will not be in settlement of the claim between Post Office and Fujitsu. Is that what you're saying?
So Mr. Steen, I have had no conversation with the Post Office about the standstill agreement. That's our legal teams and our legal teams. As far as I'm concerned, if there's any contribution to compensation, it will always be outside that conversation.
And lastly, where in all of this is the situation that's been described, which is that Fujitsu awaits the close of the inquiry? Now, Sir Wynne has asked you some questions. What do you mean by the end of the inquiry? Is that this year, or is that at some point next year when the inquiry reports? OK, fine. Why is it that Fujitsu wants to wait until the end of the inquiry before dealing with such matters? What's the rationale?
So when I sat in this room in January, there were some things I knew and I didn't know. I've now spent the last 7 months, as you have, listening to evidence about what other people and other organisations did or didn't do. The notion that this is all down to a software bug and has contributed to the largest miscarriage of justice in the United Kingdom is incorrect. These are complex matters, as you well know, based over many, many decades. And we have learnt as an organisation a great deal about the causes of this miscarriage of justice.
Yes, well, let's go back to my question. Why is it that Fujitsu needs to await the close of this inquiry before it deals with matters such as compensation or contributions towards compensation?
For the reasons I've just said, these are complex matters which we need to understand all those components. Now, what we do know, and as I said to Sir Wynne just a moment ago, by the time we get to the end of this week, we'll have a better idea on a number of those topics about how we can contribute. You've given me a suggestion here, and I've already committed to meeting with the lost families.
But, Mr. Patterson, you already accept that there is a need for Fujitsu to put its money where its mouth is. You already accept that there's at least a discussion to be had about supporting people that have been affected by the scandal. Why wait? Is this legal advice? Wait until the end of the inquiry when it's all gone quiet?
Far from it gone quiet. I don't expect this to go quiet at all. Why should it go quiet? These are serious matters.
But is this your decision to wait till the end of the inquiry, or is it legal advice? What is it, Mr. Fujitsu? Who's telling you to wait until the end of the inquiry?
I'm not sure about answering that question fully. He can say, I'm not going to tell you about our legal advice, can't
That's
he?
true, but it is his choice.
Yeah, well, I'm just reminding him he has a choice.
Yes. Mr. Patterson?
I mean, the reality, Mr. Patterson, isn't it, is that by listening to all the evidence first, you will have a much better idea about the culpability of Fujitsu, if any. Isn't that the reality of it?
Yes, it is, Sir Win.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
So the end result of this is that we know that the Post Office has indicated that they wish to bring forward restorative justice proposals. Will Fujitsu commit to supporting that?
So you asked me a question a moment ago, do I trust the Post Office?
Well, you've got a choice, Mr. Patterson. You can reject working with the Post Office as you like. Will Fujitsu commit to supporting restorative justice proposals?
So the new management team inside the Post Office, I would welcome that opportunity to sit down and talk to them about those topics. Yes, Mr. Steen.
Sooner rather than later, Mr.
I spoke to the Post Office executives on Friday. I'm speaking to them again on Thursday. So sooner rather than later, yes.
And avoiding any other problems, will you commit also to meeting with Mr. Enright and his team from Howe & Co. sooner rather than later?
So, Mr. Steen, you've asked me that question before as well, and the answer is I won't commit to that.
You won't.
Thank you, Mr.
No, not sooner rather than later. You've just given me a whole bunch of caveats to that meeting. You've just offered to me that you've got some experience in those areas. I will talk to my team about how do we get the value from that conversation. But I'm not going to sit down and commit to meeting Mr. Enright tomorrow or today or whenever. I need to have that conversation first.
Right, well, it's avoiding tomorrow. What about?
You said the words tomorrow and today, and was there anything? You gave me a number of caveats.
Before Christmas.
That's enough, gentlemen. That's enough. I think I've got the picture. Thank you very much. And it's finishing dead on time, Mr. Steen, so well done.
Thanks, sir.
Right, good. We'll resume again at 10 o'clock tomorrow, but first, or lastly today, I should thank you, Mr. Patterson, for appearing again at the inquiry, for producing witness statements on behalf of Fujitsu, and making the commitments to the extent that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Win.